Hey, I'm Colleen. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist and a family emotional regulation coach. Today, we're going to be talking about how sensitivity is a strength and not a weakness, which is a little bit of a different way to view it because in my practice, I'll work a lot with highly sensitive children. I'm a highly sensitive person myself, and sometimes the difficulty of navigating that can seem like a challenge or something that maybe is a weakness in some way, but I kind of want to reframe it as I've been doing in my practice and the work with the children that I'm seeing, in how we can kind of reframe that narrative and shift the way that we interact with these children. So, we'll first talk about what is our role as adults when we are interacting with these children and ideally kind of guiding them along life to reach a more regulated state. So, the first thing that we want to do is to create an emotionally safe environment for the children to feel safe expressing all of their feelings. The first thing that I always do, no matter what, whenever I'm meeting a child, is make sure that they feel safe. And then, bonus, we make it, fun and positive, but they need to feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, then they will be shutting down in some way or masking. And from that place, you really can't work through the more challenging emotions because they're just pushing it all in. So we want them to feel safe expressing all of their emotions. Sometimes it's easier when things are good, but the work that I really do is what happens when the challenging feelings do come up. How do we respond to them? How do we help them? So we'll kind of be talking about that today and in depth a lot more in the future, but we want them to feel safe feeling whatever they feel. And then the other thing we want to do is to manage our own emotional state, which is easier said than done, but co-regulation is everything, and I'll be speaking a lot about that because I do find that our ability to regulate ourselves is the best thing that we can do for the children in our lives. The other thing we want to do is to give them tools to manage their environment and emotional state. Some of the highly sensitive kids may just need more support with this. They feel more, they take more in, they process things maybe differently or at a higher level or in some capacity that we may not fully understand because only the person in their body really knows what they're experiencing. So even with the kids that we may know, extremely well or the ones that are close to us, we can still guide them, but we will never get the full idea of where they are. Only they can really do that. So, in order to give them tools to manage themselves, that's ultimately a really effective way to go about that. This is one of my favorite things ever that I really want to speak on, and it's believing in them. The more that we focus on their strengths and hold the perspective that we believe that they can do anything, that is really the best thing that we can do for any child in our life. Because sometimes when there is a challenge or a really challenging behavior or something that we may experience that is not preferred or a behavior that feels like it's out of our ability to manage, then we can maybe, without even realizing it, project some frustration on the children, or we don't know how they're going to get through it. So then we might project that in some capacity, and they are really sensitive to that. And really, that came in more depth as I've really been doing this work with children, but just believing in them. You don't need to have the answer for them, but to believe that they will find it is like the most powerful thing that you can do. Um, so let's talk about the children themselves and how we kind of talked about what to do as adults, and now we'll talk about how we can really specifically help the children. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to give them tools to manage their environment and their own regulation. Again, easier said than done, but self-regulation is a lifelong process. So starting it at a young age, I do find to be extremely effective and really a better way than learning it later in life. One of my biggest philosophies is just starting the children out with tools when they're young, and then they can get the momentum and start practicing those tools at a young age. And then as adulthood, ideally be a lot more regulated, but maybe a topic for another day. Um, yeah, so the other thing that we really want to do is we want to give them some body based activities and exercises. We want them to feel grounded and secure in their bodies. And children that are highly sensitive to, well, highly sensitive children, they can present in different ways. Some kids are highly sensitive to noise, to people, sounds. It can present in a lot of different capacities, and at different times, it may present differently. So, again, we don't know exactly what they're experiencing, but we can give them tools to regulate. But really, we want to help them figure out what helps them feel good. Do they need their own alone time? Really getting them in touch with their bodies and grounding activities. And I have a feeling workbook coming out soon, which I'm so excited about. And it will have all these different activities and exercises that you can do with the children in the home environment or really any environment to really go deeper into these skills and giving them strategies that they can be using throughout the day. And there also will be some co-regulation strategies in there that I'm really excited about. The other thing we can do for these children is let them know that all feelings are okay. One of the things that I find, and again, we're human, like challenging feelings are challenging. And sometimes if we're not really ready for their big feelings, it might give that impression that their feelings aren't okay. So really, the more that we can reshape those big feelings, it's easier to work through them. I find that some children, I've really been finding this past calendar year, these big feelings have been coming up with children, whether it's anger or frustration, and they don't feel okay with it. So it comes out, they hold it in, comes out in these big outbursts, and then they're not really willing to focus on it and to work through it. So, they kind of shut down and then move on, and then it happens again. Anyway, that's where I come in. And it's kind of teaching them that it's okay to have those big feelings and us being okay with their big feelings. Ultimately, they're able to work through it and then they don't come up as much. But again, it is a skill to be managed. And the other thing about these children is that their heightened sensitivity is beneficial, even if it can seemingly present with some challenges, like, they might get overwhelming in certain environments, or school may be a lot. I will be speaking in depth about school, maybe in another video. I have a lot of thoughts about it, but it's a stimulating environment. There might be a lot of sound and children and having to do things that they may not feel ready for. And anyway, so just kind of teaching the children that it is a skill to be managed will help them kind of understand that it's something that's ongoing. A big thing is that our goal isn't to lessen their sensitivity, it's to give them tools to independently manage it. And again, it's like that independent self-regulation is like one of the best goals that we can have for these children. They learn these skills ideally with support at a young age, and then they become adults who are regulated, and then they can kind of hold that container to help other children regulate. And then it's kind of like a beautiful new cycle that we can start in the way that we're learning skills at a young age to regulate our own emotions. We practice that, we're regulated, we become the adults, we can help children learn to regulate. And again, I think it could be a new cycle that maybe hasn't really been done before, but I do think it's going to be the way moving forward. And they kind of learn this through regulated adults. So again, easier said than done. I think that maybe a lot of adults right now didn't have these skills growing up. So we kind of have to learn them as adults and then, fly the plane as we're building it. But it's also this kind of social emotional learning is a lot more present and prevalent at this young age for the children these days. And then the last thing that we'll talk about is kind of highly sensitive adults and co-regulation strategies. We kind of touched base in the beginning about our role as adults, but this is really focused on you adults and what we can do for ourselves, and ultimately the best thing we can do for anyone else, especially the children in our lives, is that we take care of ourselves. And sometimes it seems a little bit counterintuitive, like, oh, if we put ourselves first, then we won't have, the energy or focus for someone else. But actually, it's the opposite. If we don't put our own regulation first, then we have nothing to share. It's kind of like the blind leading the blind. It's like you can't help when you have empathy and you just meet them kind of in their chaos. You have to be the calm to their chaos, or there are other words to use it, but it's kind of the phrase that I'm going for. You might understand what I'm saying, but the first thing that we need to do is we need to manage our own needs first. As short story, but as a pediatric OT, when I was figuring all of this out, I've been doing this for 10 years at this point. I didn't really have these skills and I was just depleted a lot. And then what happened is over the years, I figured, started really working with all of the tools that, we'll be sharing, but I put myself first, my own regulation. And then that's when all of this work really picked up. Like I was really able to share more and learn more and show up for other people when I was regulated instead of just like keeping my head above water and doing the best I could from that place. But yeah, we have to prioritize our own regulation and put our needs first before we can help others or even to genuinely, truly share with others. We need to be putting ourselves first. Some co-regulation tools that we'll talk about, but I'm planning the next video to be in-depth co-regulation. I love that topic so much. There's so much to share. Anyway, so meditation. It's tricky. I mean, it's definitely tricky at first because things may come up, but some sort of meditation practice can really help you regulate, especially as we live in such a stimulating world, interacting with others, phones, technology, work. It's just kind of a high intensity, and finding some time to really get a break from that can be really beneficial for your own regulation. And also, it helps in the other moments when you have to show up and be present. The meditation can really be a good way to kind of prepave that. Spending time in nature, sitting with yourself. And another thing that is pretty key is just honest self-reflection, which we can talk more about, but I do find that the more that we can truly be honest with ourselves, it does help us work through some of those more challenging things that may be coming up. But yeah, we'll talk about self-regulation for adults and co-regulation maybe in the next video because there's just a lot to say about that. But yeah, in closing, I would love to kind of reframe how we view these children with heightened sensitivities. It could be sensory sensitivities, it could be emotional sensitivities, usually when they're really young, and it's a combination of both because children initially learn through their senses. And then that leads to more of the brain developing and the emotional regulation piece. But yeah, this is my first video and I'm so excited to share more. I just feel like this is a good way to really unpack these more complex topics in a more deep way that we can really get the explanation that really helps learning occur. So thank you for watching.